a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Biggest conversation, 7 minutes after 7 on this first day of August 2023. Welcome to the second hour of Kenya's biggest conversation. This is a Situation Room on Spice FM, on KTN Home, and on Facebook and YouTube. We live stream the show every weekday morning on all these platforms. Karibu sana. Have you registered to the Boma Yangu platform? bomayangu.go.ke. This is the government's platform for affordable housing, where they list all the projects that are going on. And just mention a couple.
Okay, so there's the King's Boma Estate in Kiambu County. We're also How much? 1.5 million, isn't it? King's Serenity in Kajiado, and that's Rongai. Kilifi Mtwapa, Nairobi again, and also looking into Mombasa, Buxton Point. Quite a number of completed projects already. The plan is for many, many more in the country. So where are you? Where would you like to purchase? Where would you like to start your journey towards home ownership? It's easy. *8
3 2 hash. That's it. *832 hash. Follow the prompts. They'll ask you, please enter your ID and tell us your surname, and then they'll recognize you and tell you, oh, Charles Muga. It's been a while, bana. Karibu sana. So then they'll tell you, you see, these are the houses that are present.
Ready.
Please select a project. And then you select, and then tell you, all right, now start saving. Put 200 shillings, and then start your journey towards saving. You will be saving into the Boma Yangu project platform. And when you get to 10% of the value of the house that you've chosen, say this one, 7-star apartments in Mtwapa is going from 1.25 million shillings. That means when you save up to 125,000 bob, then the project is completed. The algorithm will then consider you for selection. It's all algorithm, AI-based, not direct people sitting somewhere and saying, you know what, najua city alikuwa ameniongelesha tumweke kwa hii nyumba. Nothing. It is all fair and transparent. Register today, *832 hash. Dr. Juma Mukhwana is the Principal Secretary in the State Department for Industry in the Ministry of MITI, Investments, Trade and Industry. He's our guest today. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
Karibu sana. That's the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you.
You are here so we can talk about industrialization in this country. Now, of course, you have a tough job because when it comes to industry, many people talk about, factories closing, things going down, contribution of manufacturing to GDP dropping in the next couple of years. There's an ambitious plan going forward. That's what we're here to talk about. What your ministry is doing and your State Department.
Thank you. I think to summarize it, Eric, I would say that if Kenya was a vehicle, then the engine for that vehicle is industry. If that industry is not working,
that vehicle will not
move. It doesn't matter how well you paint it.
Very good.
Thank you.
Karibu sana. City has the day's proverb. This week's proverbs are from Somalia.
Yes, they are. A man who doesn't know about war is likely the one who will rush to it.
A man who doesn't know about war is likely the one who will rush to it.
Yes.
Bona PS, what's your interpretation of that proverb?
Okay, I guess the short version of it is to say that experience is important in whatever you want to do. I would take it like that. Yeah.
When you know something, then you'll know how to approach it.
Yes, and when you've been there, you know the thorns, you know the sharp corners, you know the hills, you know the valleys, and you know the dangers.
Yes.
And you know the benefits. So really you have... In business, they would call it cost-benefit analysis. You know the pros and the cons, so you know how to move.
Okay.
Yeah. In other words, I guess you must have both sides of the equation for you to proceed. I would think like that. Yep.
PS, introduce us to your State Department. What's your mandate?
Quite wide, cuts across. It's one of the oldest state departments in the country, and our mandate is to add value to raw materials. We are an agricultural-based country, so we are looking at how do you process, manufacture, whether it's adding value to tea, adding value to milk, coffee, tea, production of vehicles, motorcycles, mobiles. But then there is, beyond there, is developing policies that will support industrialization. And in that regard, we have a number of issues that we have done. We have the industrialization policy, which basically describes the route map that we as a country want to take towards taking this country to the next level. We have a policy called Buy Kenya, Build Kenya, which basically means that for us to grow, we have to support our industries, and through that, that currently 40% of all government procurement must be done. You use that to buy goods that are made in Kenya. We also have a policy called local content, which means that where we are not able to produce a whole product, we have a policy that says the more local content you add to that product, the less tax you pay. Let me give you that as an example. If you're importing a knife, you can bring us the metal part, but we can make the wooden part here. And so you don't have to pay tax for the whole knife, but you can pay tax on the metal part, and then we'll support you with lower taxation on the wooden part that you need. So we have those kind of issues. And I would say that in spite of all the struggles and the thinking that we have, because we have looked at it, if you look at the African, we may look like we're not doing very well given the history that we have. But basically, when you look at our industrialization in the region, South Africa is doing quite well. But after South Africa, we actually, in Eastern Southern Africa, we are the second in terms of manufacturing, adding value, the value of manufactured products, and of course, further north, Egypt, Morocco.
How do we measure this? When you say we are second?
We are measuring by the number of manufactured products. You will say, if you look at it globally, so that I put you in a more strategic picture, Africa, with 1.2 billion people, is 17% of the world's population. But our share of manufactured products is only 3%. The ideal situation, we should be 17% of our manufactured products globally should be from Africa. We are only doing 3%. That means we are running 14% behind schedule. But in terms of, if you look at the continental perspective, we are not where we want to be, but we are better than many of our contemporaries. That's what I would say.
There's always this mention of the percentage of goods that are manufactured that ought to be from Kenya. But the question that Eric asked follows here as well. How do we ensure that this happens? I'll tell you why I'm asking the question.
Yes, please.
There's always been talk, I don't know how true it is, of mostly in the sugar industry, that sugar is imported into the country and then repackaged as though it is locally manufactured, just for an example. Now, how then can we be sure that this is A, true or false, or other products that we are told are actually manufactured in Kenya are actually, in fact, manufactured in Kenya?
We have very good data in terms of, if you go to KPA, we actually know what is imported. The more situation of sugar, if you look at, we've had nearly 7 sugar factories across the country. We know how they are all performing. But in terms of data collection, remember you have to pay tax for all the things that you import. And also, with most of the manufacturing areas, we have what we call bonded warehouses. So we have a good data. I would say that our data is quite accurate. And I'm not saying that we are doing very well, but we are not where we need to be. But as I've said, we are doing better than most.
Where does Kenya need to be? Usually they say that if you have a goal, then you're able to then set the steps. From your understanding of what you see when you put out the plan, where does Kenya need to be in this area of manufacturing? We often say that you look at countries that have been able to get themselves out of the development rut, is that they started to make their own and then sell the surplus, which is essentially what happens. Where does Kenya need to be for you to say, okay, yes, we're at the place where things are happening and we don't have to, squabble for?
Number of issues. A few years back, manufacturing was quite high as a percentage of GDP. That's how we measure it. We were almost at 20% manufacturing contribution to the GDP. Currently, as we talk, we are at about 7.3%. So it has been going down. The policy of the Kenya Kwanza government is we take this to about 15% by 2027. So we think that it's good potential, but there's also a lot of issues that we can learn from our other people. I agree with you that you can't grow manufacturing by manufacturing for other people. You grow manufacturing by manufacturing for yourself, and then by extension, maybe whatever surplus you have, then you go across the borders. If you look at the situation of China, if you look at the situation of US, they have grown their products for their local markets, and then beyond there, then they sell to us and other people. As Africa and Kenya in particular, we definitely have our issues. So it means what it means in basic terms, because manufacturing is better when you put in the issue of economies of scale. If you have a population of 300 million, the US example, or 1.4 billion, the China example, then you have a very good, solid background, which means that if you make a bottle of water, assuming there's no competition, in China, potentially you are talking about 1.4 billion buyers. If you're making a bottle of water for Kenya, you know that then you are making, I don't know how many people are in the tax bracket, maybe 6 million. So that means that, remember, if you are targeting your local population, two things, the number of those people and their income is also important. And so you grow manufacturing by selling first to yourselves and then to other people, meaning that the bigger the population you have. India started by doing it for themselves, and then by extension, we are now buying drugs from India. And they have a population, 1.2 billion. So basically, okay, if you assume that there's no competition, then,
You have a ready market.
You have a ready market. The African market, and this is the last sentence I want to say, is potentially very big, 1.2 billion people. But remember, in export terms, India is actually closer than Cameroon. Cameroon is 3,000 kilometers. India is 5,000 kilometers. But if you want to sell to Cameroon, how do you go it? You go to Durban, you go to Cape Town. By the time you hit Douala, it is 8,000 kilometers. If you go the other side over the Red Sea. So the potential for Africa is there. But how do you call it? The logistics, the gymnastics, the connectivity that you need.
There are many barriers.
And that's why you find, I wanted to say, if you look at continentally, Europe, and this is important, intra-Europe trade, products made in Europe, sold in Europe, is 70%. In other words, all the products sold around Europe are made in Europe. If you go to Asia, it's about 45%. For Africa, intra-African made goods going around Africa is only 15%. So we do more business with China, with India, than with ourselves, and you can understand.
So isn't that the conversation that should be had, Bwana PS? Because even as we talk about, well, let's make sure that all the nuts and bolts that are needed for internal mechanization happen. However, there should be a greater regional conversation being had. And are those not the policies then that we should be talking about here? Because I see, if you're saying that intra-Africa trade is
15%.
Is 15%.
Yes.
If you want to compare it with other continental trade like Europe, it
70%,
it triples in number. But that's because their policy laid down from the very beginning made the environment conducive that why does Denmark have to think about trading with Kenya when they can trade with Switzerland, when they can trade with Norway, when they can trade with the United Kingdom, like that? And they've made it easy. Shouldn't we be thinking then about these policies?
If you think about, and I think the president has been quite eloquent on that Africa, in terms of where we are in a hole. But we continue to dig, and that's what if you listen to him, that's what he has been saying. We are not trading with each other, but we have the East African community. Remember, one of the things that we've had as Africa is creating institutions that have not been effective in helping us. So you have the EAC in the southern part, they have SADC, you have COMESA, you have ECOWAS, but a lot of them end up being more like, for lack of a better word, talk shops. And so you can see, because why do I say that? You have an African continental free trade area where basically, theoretically Africans should be trading with each other. 55 of us. So the countries in Africa have signed an agreement to do trade with each other. But there's another agreement that has been sitting on the table that has not been signed, called the free movement of people. So we have signed to trade, but we have refused to sign
for people to move.
So I'm asking, how is trade going to move if people can't move? I mean, it doesn't make logic, but that's who we are.
What are those bottlenecks? What is making those conversations not happen concurrently?
Remember, we have a recent colonial history, and part of that history was that we didn't quite trust each other. There was the element of divide and rule, because if you look at the boundaries that we have between you and me, those boundaries were not created by you and me. They were created by somebody else for a different purpose. In Europe, of course, you can see that if you are a member of the European Union, they no longer have control immigration. You can drive from Belgium to Netherlands without any stop. But here you find that we still have a lot of borders, we have a lot of control. And so you can almost say that the people who gave us the boundaries have abandoned them, but we are stuck with them. I can see that the president, if you realize, one of the things he has done every time he goes to an African country is to say, let's remove his visas. And one of my questions has always been, we are calling it an African Union. So why do I need a visa to go to Senegal? It's a union. We are together. We are in this why do I need... let me tell you one example. One morning I woke up at 5 o'clock. I had an early flight to Djibouti. And I go to the airport, and as I'm checking in, I'm asked, where is your visa? I said, a visa to where? They said, to Djibouti. I said, okay. I didn't realize that. So you've woken up at 3 a.m. for a 5 o'clock flight, then you realize you can't. So I'm told, okay, go back, you have to get this visa. And what does it involve? And I'm not demeaning anyone, we all do these things. But then, so you go online, you apply, you pay 50 euros, and within a minute you have I don't know. Is it the money? What are we looking for? And so as Africa, and we are part of this problem as Kenya, I think that we have quite a bit of rethinking and conversation to say, what is it that we really need to do to grow our economies? Because nobody's going to grow this for us. So we need that conversation. And I'm happy that the president has taken it up. You can see why on Saturday we were in Mombasa, and there was the issue of the visa of the Congolese. They're importing goods through Mombasa, but you need a visa to come and clear your goods. And so they're arguing, how? And why would I need? And so my visa has expired and my goods have not arrived, or I'm still clear. So what do I do? So those are issues.
And yet you're paying for all the other services.
Yes.
You're paying for the service
for
to
the
use
port,
the port.
You're paying port handling. So yes, there's quite a bit of conversation that we need to do. And that affects our manufacturing, it affects our market, it affects how we trade with each other.
If we look at the developed countries
Yes.
around the world, something which you mentioned, which has got me thinking. The one thing they did, they were able to meet the needs of whatever demands there were for goods within their own country. They were able to ensure that their country, whether it was the manufacturing, the commercial arms, they were developed to the point where the citizenry could benefit from it. So then they expanded. And because they developed it, they could trade with their immediate neighbors simply because of that. Now, we seem to be moving backwards, I would argue, in this sense. Even in the time of what we call the Moi era, our manufacturing capacity was way ahead of our neighbors. In that era, where many people look back and say, well, things were very bad. Yeah, they were bad, yes. They may have been bad, yes. But our manufacturing capacity didn't diminish as such. It actually increased. I'm saying this because when you visited the countries around Kenya, what I found surprising was you found Kenyan goods in those countries.
Yes.
That was a surprising thing. You go to a shop and you look at something that's very good and you realize it's made in Kenya. And I wasn't even aware such a thing was made in Kenya. Now, if I look at India, as you say, it's a model they followed. If I look at America, look at Europe, before they now decided to make China the manufacturing hub, they had already been doing this within their countries. Now, what is our government policy to ensure that this proven path is taken by us so that we become self-sufficient and that we're able to meet all the needs that we have locally before we now start trading with others effectively?
Let me step back a little bit. I agree with you. If you look at Eldoret town, let me just use that as an example of 1980. It was more industrialized than today.
Yes.
Because you had Ryply, you had Raymond, you had Kenit, you had CPC, you had Farmer's Choice. Today, if you go there, you'll be lucky to find one factory running. Why? Our model of industrialization was a situation where we build. Remember, a lot of the value chains, the crops that we have, were introduced to us. The industrial crops, more specifically, if you think about coffee, tea, pyrethrum. So part of the challenge that you have is our historical perspective. Remember, tea, coffee, was introduced here because you would grow it, but not for yourself, for other people.
Yeah.
So our growing was done here, but the value addition was put elsewhere. And if you think about a Kenyan, you see this cup that you're having, we call it kikombe ya chai, not kikombe ya kahawa. So part of the challenge then that you find yourself with a crop, for lack of a better word, that you're growing for somebody else. Okay? So there's very little incentive. Now the amount of coffee consumed with Java and other shops is growing. But remember, our history of industrialization is quite short. But when Henry Ford was making his first car in 1900, I don't know where your grandfather was. I mean, you can see it.
Yes.
So sometimes I think that we also punch ourselves a little bit too hard. I would say, and I agree with you, that then the other model that has not worked for us, and it was definitely not going to work, is that our model of industry was government-owned. And so Mumias Sugar, Chemelil, Sony, so you have KPCU, and you had Raymond and Kenit, and what is happening there? The government is trying to do manufacturing. All over the world, manufacturing is for private people. So I would say that, yes, it was a good model in the absence of the private sector, but there's nowhere where government manufacturing has worked. Okay, so I stop there.
No, not stop. I just want to append to what you're saying.
Yes.
It's a yes and no situation, because if I look at so-called the Asian tigers and their model, their governments are involved in literally everything. If you look at any big industry, even in Japan, I'm saying this because we had a model of that sort. We had an ICDC.
Yes.
ICDC was supposed to be that government arm that helped the government invest in these very same things that we are saying.
Yes, because government always had money.
Yes.
It was good for government to partner with the private sector.
Yes.
So increasingly what you see, if you look at Japan and India, was, yes, these things were started as government, but increasingly they brought in the private sector.
Yes.
That is why we needed the Nairobi Stock Exchange.
Yes.
Unfortunately for us, we did not have a path in terms of, yes, this is a government factory, At which point do we privatize it? At which point do we increase private sector involvement?
Right.
And how do we modernize and change? For example, I have a case of Mumias Sugar, where I come from. And Mumias Sugar was employing nearly 10,000 people, 60,000 farmers. And look at the model. The model was, it was a government-owned factory, but the government had outsourced management to Buka Ted.
Yep.
And Buka did not bring many people. They just brought 3 to 5 expatriates, the MD, the finance manager, the technical manager, and they did a good job. But what did we do? At some point, we said, no. We need to take back this. So we exit Buka. So we put Muga there. And the rest is history.
And Muga does his thing.
So if you think about it, while other people were thinking of how do we do more private into government, we are going back. We were going back from private back to, let's call it, more government.
But I think we're just deliberately bungling it. Even the taking it back from Buka back to government and then later reprivatizing it, it was all bungled. If you look at all those companies, the Raymonds and the others, government basically just, those in government who are seeing the route to private sector and to private enterprise and to privatization of these companies, they bungled it for their own selfish needs. And they just could not manage the things. Just collapsed.
Think, for instance, of Uchumi.
Yes.
The forerunner to these hyper and supermarkets. It was a huge success.
True.
Huge.
Supported by ICDC.
DC.
Yeah.
We had beach hotels. We had transport companies. I mean, I'm simply saying that model worked. There are people who argue that, again, I refer to the Asian tigers like Singapore, took this model. This is the model they looked at and they said this thing worked. Because what ICDC in this country began in 1954?
Yeah.
Long before independence. So it's not that we were not on the right path. Eric's assertion in my mind is what is true. It was deliberately sabotaged. It was actually working. It was a model you could see. As you say, we had Kikomi. We had, in the Lake region, we had cotton growers. My grandmother grew cotton. The industry could have grown. Why did it not grow? Because cotton is still being grown. People still use cotton. Cotton industries grow elsewhere in the world. I mean, if the idea and the thinking behind it came to an end globally, you'd say, that was a dead end. It never was a dead end.
It continued
let me go specifically to cotton, for example. I agree with you. We had Mountex, we had Raymond, we had Kenneth. Remember, we even had a Kenyan cloth shop, Deacons.
We did.
But then you see policy making and the way we've done it. For example, now one of the big conversations you saw even during the last election was the issue of Mitumba. And so you can't disaggregate. What do we need? Do we need more Mitumba or do we need more new clothes? And you see, if your shirt there, the one you're putting on, is costing 5,000 shillings, and I'm buying a bell of 50 kilos with 50 shillings, with 50,000, 5,000. How do you compete this bell with this coat that I'm putting on? So part of it is policy making, and this is historical. It's something that has taken time. At some point, obviously, we need a very candid conversation with ourselves in terms of, because there's no way you are going to grow the textile industry, for example, without addressing the issue of what do you do with Mitumba. Look at our shoes. It's the same problem. So you find you trying to do, we say we have the second largest herd of livestock in Africa. We are slaughtering 3 million cattle every year. But what's happening to the hides and skins? We are not adding value, because then sometimes this is again being outcompeted by some of those policy directions. And you saw how heated it was during the campaigns, whether we need to import more used shoes or we need to make more new shoes. And those are the balances that we have to really take. And remember, our policy making is both a technical and political issue. So we have to balance guess both. Is as good as mine. Yeah.
Let's take a break at 26 minutes to 8. Dr. Juma Muhwana is the Principal Secretary in the State Department for Industry, Ministry of Investments, Trade and Industry. We're talking about industrialization. This goal of hitting 15% contribution to GDP by manufacturing within the next 4 years, by 2027, how are we going to do it? That's what we're discussing. What Kenya needs to do to get back industrialization, to accelerate our industrialization.
Let's talk about the holidays and GoTV. With GoTV, every day is a fun-filled day for kids at all ages. It will make your child entertained, rather have your child entertained, and grow their imagination with different shows. So GoTV says from Monday to Friday, your child could go to any station. Garbage Boy, for example, is on at 5:45, and later on at 6:55, you can then see what's going on with Zig and his friends, airing on Cartoonito channel 50 on GoTV Super. Don't miss out. Download my GoTV app or dial *423# and stay connected to the fun. GoTV, love it.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
I have a brother. He was a pilot. He was laid off. He came to a policeman. He messed up.
He went from a pilot to a policeman.
Exactly.
He stole a jet.
Yeah.
In fact, you should be lucky he was not court-martialed.
The Spice Drive. Big hair and the biggest hits from the best decade.
Indeed, it's all about hashtag Spice Drive hashtag.
As we feed the brains of our little ones in school, the Standard newspaper takes pride in knowing that we are making a mark in the growth of their minds through the newspapers in education program that steers them in the right direction. And we are proud of it.
The teacher facilitates, the teacher guides the lesson, gives directions. The learner now becomes the central part of learning. So during that, you see when they benefit, the learner benefits more than when the teacher is the main presenter. So it actually benefits learners more. It exploits their potential, learning skills, the communication, how they collaborate, how they assist one another, and how they create and innovate things here and there. It perfectly helps because, for example, like the NIE, we can give them a newspaper and tell them to read maybe page 14 and page 15. Then they do a summary of the story that is written there. So from the summary, it even provokes their thinking, some creativity. It makes learning fun in class. And when learners are given an opportunity to explore learning under any browsing in the internet without proper guidance, they tend to be predisposed to unnecessary and age-restricted sites. But NIE is perfect for their learning. So there's nothing negative that can interfere with their morals, their values. So I would recommend that as much as we talk of this print media, the audio visuals, NI is very good for this kind of level of learning, the primary school and junior secondary school.
To adopt and sponsor a school class on the NIE program, it will only cost 14,400 shillings per term or 43,200 shillings per year. For more information, please contact Ronnie Ouma on 0720-809-823 or rouma@standardmedia.co.ke. Newspapers in education. Readers are leaders.
Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
This morning in the Situation Room, and we're talking about what the ministry and the State Department specifically are doing to improve our industrialization. So, PS, in about 10 or so years, or 15 years, let's say, our manufacturing contribution to GDP dropped from 20% to 7%. That's a huge drop. What caused it?
Thank you, Eric. I would say that I've already started to discuss that. I think it has to do with a mixture of our policy making and also, and I think, so part of what we've done is those policy making means that sometimes you're doing tax issues that then favor people that want to import. I think we've become a heavily importing country. And that's what you're trying to roll back.
So it was basically bad decision making.
I would say so.
And that affected
but also we've
our
had,
manufacturing sector.
Yes, but also I would say that we have not been very competitive in terms of our environment, in terms of our logistics, in terms of our cost for power. When I go around the region, this one I don't really agree, but some people think that our cost of labor is higher. But I always say that really, when I look at the region, sometimes because we have a minimum wage that is well beyond what other people may have, but I think that industry must add value. So I see sometimes what people call cheap cost of labor in some of our neighbors, and it looks more like exploitation. So I would say that a combination of issues, the cost of doing business, also, as I've said, the power, logistics, and of course policy making, that we've not really been very good at protecting what we have.
The agenda is to push this back from the current 7% to 20% by 2030, to 15% by the next election, 2027. That means that drastic measures have to be taken. We have to see then a drastic drop in the cost of power. We have to see a drastic cost in the cost of doing business, drop in the cost of doing business. What are you doing about that?
Yes, let me start by saying that industry is quite expensive. And part of the reason why many people don't venture there is that the cost of entry into manufacturing can be quite high. And that's one major hindrance for people that want to go into that space. And we are addressing that issue by introducing a number of measures that we are doing. We are already negotiating about the issues of cost of power. I know that we've had public hearings about with EBRA and others. We also realize that if you are going to manufacture and you have to buy 50 acres and buy a machinery of 600 million and develop your value chain in terms of the raw materials, that this takes time. So as government, there are a number of issues that we are doing. When we came in, for example, we found our export promotion zone, APZ, in Athi River. That's basically full. And what that is a common manufacturing area. This is a government place that we develop industrial sheds, and you as a manufacturer, you only bring in your machines and you start manufacturing. And that was full. We have been struggling over the last 10 years with establishing, you've heard of Dongo Kundu in Mombasa, which was basically manufacturing on the sea for export, and also the Naivasha Special Economic Zone. And what was happening there was also a bit not well thought out, because then people would come in there and they say, I want 5 acres to manufacture. You give somebody a license to do the same. And 5 years down the line, he has not even broken the ground. And so what have we done? So we have changed the model for Dongo Kundu and Naivasha. And basically what the government is doing now is to develop, in partnership with other people, develop the place so that you just plug in. I think the idea of giving land to people to put up a manufacturing space doesn't occur well. So for example, as we talk now, we are at a very advanced stage of developing the whole of Dongo Kundu and Naivasha.
What does development mean?
Development means that that we do the roads, we do bring in water, bring electricity, high power electricity, bring in internet, bring wastewater management, and so that you just bring your machinery, you plug in and play, and that is a bold step that I think that we are doing, and so we already are at that stage where I think in a few months' time, we'll break ground, both in Dongo Kundu and in Naivasha. And we've gone a step further, that we've said this is not enough. So if you know that the ministry has already gazetted 5 new other special economic zones, export promotion zones. We've gazetted Sagana in Muranga, also Del Monde in Thika. We have also gazetted Tatu City as a private place. We also have Egerton University. We have Eldoret. And we have Busia. And we have a big one coming up in Kisumu, the one with United Green, nearly 34 billion. which will establish the same issue, go back to manufacturing of cotton, rice, and also the fish. So we are expanding those areas, and we are also not going to use the old model where we talked of land. You see, we've been talking about Dongo Kundu, but we have not manufactured one thing out of it.
Yep.
Now we are moving in that direction. The other issue that is on the table that is big and different is the county aggregation and industrial parks. We are working, my state department, with the counties. Each county has to identify land, 10 to 30 acres. They have already done that. And in this finance year, each county is contributing 250 million. The national government is contributing 250 million. Already 40 counties have gone into tendering for construction. And what are we constructing? We are constructing a place where you and me can manufacture. So we are putting up the infrastructure, and the model that we are using is quite new and different. Nobody else has actually done this, Eric, because what we are doing is we are not just constructing an industrial park in Nyeri, but we have also done feasibilities. We have identified the value chains that Nyeri can manufacture, and Murang'a, and Busia, and Eldoret. And we are working with development partners. So we put up an industrial park in Nandi, and we put manufacturing equipment there. Let's assume you've put up a maize milling plant in Kitale. So Muga here can actually come up with his 5,000 bags of maize. We'll tell him what quality to bring. He will come and book this machine and say, on Monday, I want to come and mill my maize. And we can develop a packaging for him, 1 kilo, 5 kilos, 2 kilos. You come, you mill your maize, you pack your maize, you go and sell. And then Eric can come and use the same machinery at 2, and Indo here can come the following day. And so this is a common manufacturing facility, if it's for milk, if it's for tea. And so what it means is that you don't need your own machine, you don't need your own employees, you don't need your own power. We agree if you are milling a kilo of maize, this will cost you 15 shillings. So you grow your market. And when you think that you have grown your market sufficiently, you can buy your own machine. So this is the model that we are using. And it's quite exciting. We have had a lot of talks with the governors, with the international community, and this is our local grown model of how we want to industrialize this country. And the construction, as I've said, the tendering for construction has gone out. We expect in the next 1.5 years for us to be quite advanced in that process, and then we move into manufacturing.
It sounds like the light industries. That
Yes,
we used to have, like Kariobangi Light Industries and elsewhere.
and KIA in our earlier
KIA,
version, but
yes.
this is a little bit more people-centric because we are not just building an industrial park in Eldoret. If I use, for example, the example of Eldoret, we have already identified the land, we have identified the value chains that we want to do, but what do we do? About 2 months ago, we worked with the governor of Uasin Gishu, Koti Moja, to bring together what we are calling a county investment forum. So basically what the county was doing was inviting people that have potential to invest in this industrial park. And the idea was, let's call 30 people. We tell them we are developing this industrial park. People can start to appreciate what we are doing and also start to say, okay, me, I can do milk, me, I can do wheat, me, I can do... and we ended up with 200 people. And in fact, the conversation didn't change. People said, okay, if you're only doing 3 value chains and I have more money to add another factory, can I do it myself? And we're saying, yes, what we are doing can be both national, can be both government, but even you as Eric, you can also put up your own, you may not be interested in manufacturing. You can put up a manufacturing facility and people can still use it. It's a common manufacturing. So you can put up a factory in Kisumu for making rice, milling rice, and today Otieno does it, and tomorrow Ochieng does it, and yours is to charge money, and so it can be a private sector model. So so our meeting had both physical and people online. We had people from diaspora, and so the model has changed quite a bit. If we look at the model for Nairobi, and we have been discussing with Governor Sakaja, he has identified a location on Thika Road near Mathare Hospital. We had a small, the way we did it, we didn't want every county to design, pay an architect, do BQ. So we did a common design. But when we came to Nairobi, for example, other private sector people came in. They said, this is 10 acres of land. You can do what you're doing, but I can do something. So we now have like 5-6 people that have signed up that they can do their own factory. They are not going to manufacture everything. They'll put the machinery there, and you and me can go in and make whatever we want to make. So this is something that is quite exciting, and we think that through that, that's why we are targeting 15%, because basically we would like to industrialize every part of this country. That's what I would say.
I hear you. Over and above this is that essentially what is being done is that a conducive environment is being made for then people, Kenyans, to come in, plug, as you say, plug into a system and then be able to produce and sell within the market or externally. One of the most expensive factors for manufacturing or industry is the cost of power, energy. Have these things been taken into consideration even as you go into this? Because people will then have that monkey on their shoulders in terms of, all right, this has been done, but one of the inputs is electricity, and it's expensive in Kenya today.
We're actually thinking quite a bit out of the box on that. So a number of things have been done. For example, if you look at Naivasha Special Economic Zone, we have already cassetted that the current cost of power has been 20 US cents per kilowatt hour. What we have gazetted for Naivasha, for example, is 5 cents. Because Naivasha is very close to geothermal generation and so on. So we've taken advantage of that. In the county industrial parks, about a month ago, I was out in Vienna at a meeting of the UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. And we are developing a partnership where part of the energy that will come to the county industrial parks would be energy that we can generate through solar, for example. So some of the light factories can use that. We are also exploring the issue if you are in Marsabit or you are in Gong, can you use wind power? So we and you've seen that the conversation on climate adaptation, and we also bring up this issue of the African Climate Summit. That part of what we would like to say is that part of this industrialization is going to be green. And so we are thinking, what is the possibility that, because honestly speaking, if you look at Kenya geographically, I know that there are many issues that have been said about electricity. Our country is only 25%, you can call it arable. So you can't compete with Uganda and with maybe Tanzania in terms of how much water and you can turn around. And okay, we can do a little bit more, but a lot of our country is dry. And that's why when you look at agricultural value chains, a lot of other regional players are overtaking us. And we can appreciate why. If a country is 100% arable, and we are trying to compete with them using this 25% that is also going up into estates and other infrastructure, then you can see that our competitive on agro processing can be quite limited. And that's why we are thinking beyond just that, steel, cement, solar. Now you have seen the conversation. We are moving this conversation to electric vehicles and electric motorbikes. So that if we remained an agro-based manufacturing, we see that regionally we may not be very competitive. And that's why part of the challenge that we don't really discuss. If you look at Mumias Sugar, when it was established in 1970s, the average land holding in Busia and in Bungoma, the area where we grow sugar, was 30 acres per family. Today is half an acre. So you are going 60 kilometers from Mumias to a little farm, half an acre in Busia to harvest cane, and transport that back another 60 kilometers. So 120, it is not cost effective. You're not going to compete with Brazil. You're not going. So part of it is Sudan. So our competitiveness, because of land holding and the pressure on land and so on, you find that the factories are moving further and further away. And so when we talk about competitiveness, sometimes we just think about electricity. Our increasing population. When we got independence in 1963, Eric, we're only 5 million people. Today we are 50 million. That's 10 times more. The land size has not increased by an inch. So that means that really, in terms of finding solutions, we must be more innovative. We must think out of the box.
But industrializing, when you have natural resources, is a path that many of these countries have also followed. We have a steel smelting manufacturing plant somewhere, I think in Samburu,
yes.
Devki. I am informed that we have a lot of iron ore in the Taita Hills. Now, when we talk of industry and then we talk about natural resources that we have, and I am also informed that we have them in plenty, including aquifers that may have brackish water, but then we have the sun. So when you talk about desalination, plants that are solar powered, what I'm saying is, I like what I'm hearing. The government is looking at solutions that suit our situation. But beyond meeting these needs that we have for local so that people can participate, that is a good plan. What about the Devki kind of operation? People who are willing to invest at that level. And how then do communities where these natural resources are found benefit directly from these? Because that, in turn, also helps the growth of what you've just said, growing these industries at a local and at a county level.
Yep.
Yes, I agree with you, and that's why we have two models. The model of the county industrial aggregation and industrial park is for small people. The model of export promotion zones and special economic zones is for big people. And so you can see, and it's not just government. Tatu City is a good example. You can see that at Tatu City, which is a private special economic zone, for example, now Moderna, one of the big American vaccine manufacturing plants, is putting up a vaccine-making factory for Africa. They looked at Kenya, of course. One of the things that we are also trying to position ourselves is to position Kenya as your gateway to Africa. So many people, as I've said, and this is where we started, feel like, okay, manufacturing for Kenya is good, but is there a sufficient market? Yeah. And so part of why we have been quite keen on the African continental free trade area is to say that if you manufacture in Kenya, you are actually doing it for Africa, and that is something that we are selling, and it's coming up. That's why we have the likes of Moderna coming here. In terms of natural resources, for lack of a better word, Kenya is not very well endowed compared to the rest, but we have what God gave us. And what I would say is that sometimes those also require very high levels and expensive technology. And Devki has already invested in that plant. I am aware we have iron ores. I'm told the quality may not be as good as we want it. And so part of it now is also he's getting a bit of that from Uganda. So there's an arrangement where he's getting from Taita Hills and also he's getting from Uganda so that you have good quality steel. And what the government has done, because part of the challenge why many people didn't invest in that kind of area was taxation. That sometimes the reason why we can't explore these resources is that imported steel is cheaper than what we are making. And so this year, you've seen a bit of noise from the manufacturers because we said to support what Devki is doing, we will establish something called import levy. So if you want to import something that we can make here, we will not stop you, but we'll make it more expensive. And so we've put an import levy on steel, on clinker, and we're not just putting a levy. What are we doing with this money? I said earlier on that industrialization is very expensive. So the money we are charging you as you import, we are establishing an industrialization fund. So basically what we are trying to say is that, remember, we already have a youth fund, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. We have a women fund. But I said somewhere that, Muga, if we had an industrialization fund, we would be unlikely even to need a women fund or a youth fund. Because if we had an industrialization fund where you can go and borrow 5 billion for 25 years at 3%, you will employ these 5,000 youths. So I would say that this is the real medicine. Okay. What we could be doing through the youth fund and others, maybe, is it Panadol for a headache? But without, so we are using.
So the industrialization fund is the one.
Is the one, because this will give you the resources that you need. And this financial year, we are targeting between 10 and 15 billion. You can borrow 300 million, you can borrow 400 million if you want to establish an industry. And that's where we are going.
Controversial, Buana. Industrialization fund, housing fund, many funds. But
this one, we are not asking you to pay. Okay, you pay through the imports.
From those who are importing.
If you love the imports, and sometimes Kenyans love imports, you know that. Okay.
P.S. Thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Juma Muhwana is the Principal Secretary in the State Department for Industry. He's been our guest this morning. We've talked about industrialization. Come again, PS. This is a conversation that we need to have, especially on the KIPES and the rollout of the county aggregation and industrial aggregation and industrial parks.
Yeah.
Come again. Keep it here for more conversation. News time, 8:08.
We'll be engaged on.
The question of cost of living is never